Hello, ladies and gentlemen. How you doing tonight? Hey, good, I hope. Welcome to Toland Travels-LIve. I am Toland. Put all this together. We've got some amazing speakers for you here tonight. If you've been to one of these events before, you know the thing I always like to start with. Everybody, amen. I ask everybody, if you would please, get out your cell phones and put it on vibrate. And then that you got it on vibrate, take lots and lots of pictures of all of our speakers tonight. You need to like Toland Travels on Facebook. You need to follow Toland Travels on Twitter and Instagram. And check out the Tumblr and all that good stuff. And you also need to do the same as the various different speakers come up here tonight. I really encourage you to do that. We've got, like I said, really interesting, really unique and eccentric people that are going to be presenting tonight, some original things that they've created just for tonight. But before we get to that, before I get started tonight, please say thank you. Round of applause for here at Urban Standard. Support them, please. Make sure you buy lots and lots of food, and drinks, and coffee, and all kinds of stuff here tonight. Okay, so I'll get the show rolling with a little something I wrote a while back. There was a period in my life, you guys know I have traveled quite a bit. There was a period in my life when I actually was a spy. And for those of you that know me, know I'm not exactly James Bond. So the idea of me having to be a spy for anybody or any corporation is a bit of a nightmare. But so, here we go. This is called I Spy. I've traveled for many reasons over the years. I've traveled to explore, to relax, and for work, and to learn. However, I once traveled as a spy. Now let that sink in for a minute. I was a spy. I'm not kidding about that. This is not fiction. Now, to be completely honest with you, I wasn't caught up in international espionage. Instead, I was a corporate spy. My mission was to spy on a rival company and make a full report of my findings and report back to my supervisors. It sounded easy enough, but my mission was compromised and I paid the price. The whole operation began long before I ever became involved. I worked sometimes for a travel company and it was feeling threatened by a young upstart. And the upstart was essentially stealing their business, stealing their employees, and stealing their ideas. I was one of the targets of the young upstart, and they approached me about coming to work for them. Their first contact was via email, but they wouldn't fully explain what it was they wanted, and they asked me to meet them for coffee. I agreed, and after the meeting, I knew that they wanted me, and that they believed that it would be worth my while to switch my loyalties. They even wanted to explain it all to me over dinner one weekend in Florence, Italy. And they offered to fly me to Italy at no expense if I would agree to do so. I was one of several people, they explained, that would be part of this trip. And there would be meetings, of course, but there would be lots of free time and occasionally organized activities. If I was going to be impressed, I could go to work for them, but there, of course, would be no pressure. Being the loyal soldier that I was, I reported back to my handlers back at my company. And they were fascinated by the intel that I had provided them. And they encouraged me to agree to the trip, with the understanding that I would tell them absolutely everything that had happened to me upon my return. 3 months later, I was on a plane headed for Italy. I was met at the airport by one of their company representatives who drove me to my hotel. After I cleaned up a bit, I made my way downstairs and met the others that had been flown over for this special meal. We were given a walking tour of the city. We climbed the Duomo. We saw David. We had a discussion session in which the company reps outlined all the reasons why I should leave my current employer and come to work for them. We were also given copious amounts of red wine. Then the penny dropped. The itinerary for the next 2 days was laid out for us. The next day would mostly be free, but the big event, the build-up, the wooing, the bride, the whole reason that we were there would happen that night. It came with a twist, though. Of these agents, they were good, but they were also rather bad. They slowly explained to me that we would be going to a well-known cooking school, and that we would be making dinner ourselves. Then we would be asked to sign along the dotted line and commit to a change in loyalty. It was going to be fun, they said. It was going to show us how different they were from the other guys, my bosses. I was already growing tired of pretending I was having a good time in this life. The fact is that it's hard to pretend to be someone who was interested in something when you really aren't, and you have to do it all day long. In all honesty, they were just so nice and so invested in what they were doing. I really began to feel as though I was taking advantage of their hospitality. After all, these people wanted me to work for them so badly that they were willing to fly me over to Italy at a cost of several $1,000s. But quickly I pushed these thoughts out of my mind. That night, we were transported to the school, and we were divided up into 4 groups, each working on a different part of the meal. My team was going to make a zucchini appetizer and tiramisu for dessert. We measured and mixed and broke eggs and added coffee. I have to admit that for a few minutes it was all fun. And then the little guilty voice came back, and I seriously thought about my spy loyalties. Dinner was authentically Italian. It was amazing, and it was thoroughly satisfying. I ate it up, and I loved my tiramisu. I thought, maybe I could be a double agent. Then the last big sales pitch began. It was different this time than it was the night before. The previous conversation had been all Disneyland, all with smiles and happiness. Now it was dark, stern, and serious. It wasn't about our future, but about the children. We were building lives, they said. We had to think of them. What about the children, they kept saying over and over and over again. They needed a good tour guide when they came to Europe. Wasn't I highly qualified to do that? They were the only true option, they explained, with a Protestant zeal, and quickly assuming the gravitas of a badly produced Shakespearean tragedy, and their circular logic of a cult leader. Nope, I thought my loyalties were exactly where they needed to be, and it was not with these folks. As they talked, I began to feel something unusual. It started out in my lower abdomen. At first, it was a small, slightly uncomfortable feeling, but it was quickly growing. It felt almost hard, and seemed to be growing in both size and in painfulness. I thought at first that maybe it was just horrible gas. But it was different. I excused myself, I went to the bathroom, but it was a wasted trip. I came back out, and bottles of wine were beginning to be opened, and everyone seemed to be celebrating the fact that they had all gone to the dark side. Or maybe it was to the light. I was losing track of things in my current state. I was asked what it was I was going to do, and a horrible cramp grabbed my stomach. I tried to keep myself from doubling over in pain, and announced that I was going back to the hotel in a taxi. I moved outside into the ice-cold temperature that had taken over Florence that particular winter. I hailed a taxi, and I went back. By the time I had arrived, my body was beginning to shake. I was having a hard time regulating my core temperature. I was painfully cold. I moved upstairs and filled the tub with hot water. I crawled into soak for a while, hoping that might help. It didn't. I drained the tub and I stood up, and as I did, my stomach seized once more and twisted over, and I released one of the greatest explosions of vomit in modern history. Again and again, I let it go into the toilet. Between the dry heaves with my chin resting on the toilet seat, I tried to figure out what was going on with me. In my warped, sickly, spy-rattled brain, I knew there was only one logical solution. They knew. They had poisoned me. In hindsight, today, I'm more inclined to think it was probably the fact that the tiramisu had over a dozen raw eggs in it. That might have played a rather important role in what was happening to me now. But at the moment, eggs never even crossed my mind. The next morning, I learned that a few other people didn't feel well either the previous night, but today they were fine. I, however, still felt nauseous. I was dehydrated, tired, and I was just in a very bad mood. I told the company representatives about my night, and they didn't seem to care, which only made me more suspect of them. Then they began to tell me about all the beautiful things I was going to see that day on my guided tour to Tuscany. The idea of sitting in a moving vehicle all day did not appeal to me, but they pulled out the oldest torture trick in the secret agent's catalog. No, not the chair with a hole in the seat, a la the Casino Royale, but rather something far worse, peer pressure. It started with one person telling me about how much I'd be missing out on. Then a woman walked up and started in. Finally, another man came up and actually started telling me that I would let the group down and that they would be disappointed if I didn't make it. Finally, I gave in. I was a broken man. I literally had nothing left in me. When we traveled to Siena and then to a farm for lunch, which I wouldn't eat for lunch for fear of seeing it all over again, all over the farmer's floor. When I refused, the farmer's wife gave me an orange and told me to smell it, claiming it would help with the nausea. Me and my orange. Only that orange understood my pain. I was stuck in the caravan of psychological torture for the rest of the day. I was convinced that they were trying to break me. After that, I passed out somewhere on the road back to Florence. When I woke up, the car was at the hotel, and the rest of the group was going out for a glass of wine. I declined the invitation, and I started back up to my hotel room. When I was stopped by one of the company representatives who had the gall to say to me, "You really didn't seem like you were having a good time today, Brad." Bear in mind that this was one of the 3 people that had pressured me into going in the first place. I was done. I was done with him, I was done with being a spy, I was done with it all, and my doneness then he promptly came out again all over the lobby of the hotel floor. Excuse me, the floor of the hotel lobby. Early the next morning, I packed my bag and I snuck out of the hotel and I took a taxi to the airport. When I landed back in the States, I went from the airport directly to my doctor, where he gave me a heavy dose of phenytoin. I sat down and began to write out my thoughts to my superiors. It was honest and it was accurate, but I left out my bout with Italian food poisoning. It wasn't what they needed to know, and it wasn't what I needed to tell.